There's a type of childhood experience that rarely gets talked about. Not abuse, not obvious neglect, but something quieter. Being ignored. Not the child who gets punished constantly, but the one who is simply overlooked. The child whose emotions are dismissed. The one who speaks but nobody really listens. And psychologically, this kind of experience can shape a person far more deeply than people realize. Because childhood is where we learn one of the most important psychological lessons in life. Do my feelings matter? For a child, attention is not just comfort. It's information. When a parent responds to a child's emotions, whether it's happiness, sadness, or fear, the child's brain begins to learn something fundamental. My experiences are real. My voice matters. I exist in other people's minds. But when a child is consistently ignored, something different happens. The brain begins forming a very different belief. My feelings are inconvenient. My problems are not important. Maybe I should stay quiet. And this belief doesn't appear overnight. It forms slowly through thousands of small moments. A child tries to share something exciting. The parent says they're busy. The child asks for help. The parent dismisses it. The child expresses sadness. The parent changes the subject. None of these moments seem dramatic. But over time they create a pattern. And the brain is extremely good at detecting patterns, especially during childhood. One psychological concept that explains this process is emotional attunement. Attunement refers to how well caregivers notice and respond to a child's emotional state. When parents are emotionally attuned, they recognize subtle cues. A change in tone, a sad expression, a moment of frustration. They respond in ways that show the child they are understood. But when attunement is missing, the child learns something different. They learn to regulate their emotions alone. At first, this can create a child who seems unusually independent. They don't ask for help often. They don't complain much. They solve problems quietly. From the outside, adults may even describe them as mature for their age. But psychologically, something deeper may be happening. Because independence developed through emotional neglect is not the same as healthy independence. Healthy independence comes from feeling secure enough to explore the world. But ignored children often become independent because they feel like they have no other option. And that difference can follow them into adulthood. Many adults who were ignored as children develop a strong habit of emotional self-containment. They keep their thoughts private. They rarely ask for support. And even when they are struggling, they may instinctively tell themselves, "I'll handle it myself." Another common psychological effect is hyper-awareness of other people's moods. When a child grows up in an environment where emotional attention is unpredictable, the brain adapts. It becomes extremely sensitive to subtle social signals, tone of voice, body language, small shifts in expression. In many cases, ignored children become adults who are surprisingly good at reading other people. But there's a hidden cost to this ability. They may become so focused on other people's emotional states that they lose touch with their own. Instead of asking, "What do I need right now?" they ask, "What does everyone else expect from me?" This pattern can also influence how they form relationships later in life. Because if a child grows up feeling emotionally invisible, they may unconsciously seek relationships where they must work hard to be noticed. They might become the friend who always listens, the partner who gives constant emotional support, the person who tries to earn attention rather than expecting it naturally. Psychologists sometimes refer to this as attention conditioning. When attention was scarce in childhood, the brain learns that it must be earned. So adults may become unusually accommodating, patient, or understanding, sometimes at the cost of their own needs. But not every ignored child reacts the same way. Some develop a completely different coping strategy. Instead of becoming overly accommodating, they withdraw emotionally. They learn to expect very little from others. And as a result, they become extremely self-reliant. They may appear calm, composed, and emotionally distant. Not because they lack feelings, but because they learned very early that expressing those feelings rarely changed anything. Another interesting psychological pattern appears in how ignored children handle success and achievement. Many develop a strong drive to prove their worth. Because deep down there is a lingering question. If I achieve enough, will someone finally notice me? This can lead to impressive ambition. But it can also lead to chronic self-doubt. Because external recognition rarely fills a wound created by emotional invisibility. The truth is, The psychology of the ignored child is not about weakness. In fact, many of these individuals grow into incredibly resilient adults. They develop independence, observation skills, emotional endurance. But resilience developed through emotional neglect often comes with a hidden challenge. Learning how to accept attention, learning how to ask for support, learning that their voice deserves to be heard. Because the belief that formed quietly in childhood, "my feelings don't matter," doesn't have to remain permanent. Psychology shows that awareness is the first step in changing those patterns. Once someone recognizes where their emotional habits came from, they can begin rewriting the story. They can begin practicing something many ignored children were never taught: expressing their needs, setting boundaries, allowing themselves to be seen. Because the most important psychological truth about ignored children is this: being overlooked in childhood does not define your worth. It only explains the survival strategies you learned along the way. And once you understand those strategies, you gain the power to choose new ones.